We'll get started. I'm Lauren Spinelli, Marketing Manager at Telgorithm. Thank you all for being here today. A few housekeeping items. We have all of our guests on mute, so if you do have questions throughout the webinar, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them throughout and at the end. With that, I'd like to introduce Telgorithm's co-founder and CEO, Aaron Alter, as well as our head of customer success, Kris Mendoza, who will be sharing the latest on all things 10DLC. Welcome, Aaron and Kris.
Hey, Lauren. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for taking the time to join. It's been a while since we've done one of these, so might be a little rusty here, but I appreciate everyone taking the time to join today. We got a lot to cover. And thank you, Lauren, for taking the time to put this all together. There's a lot of work that goes into this behind the scenes, and that's really appreciated. Just a high level here to everyone attending here and everyone that watches this post this live webinar. Obviously, there's been a lot of industry changes, and this 10DLC is consistently changing, and those changes are ongoing. And our role is to keep you in the loop and to keep you up to speed on the latest things going on and how we here at Telgorithm are focused on those things and make sure that we are very clear in what's going on by providing a lot of knowledge and specifics on what's going on so we could understand the root of items and help things along. And that's what we're looking to cover today, and that's our goal for today's webinar. With that said, I'd like to introduce first myself. I'm Aaron, co-founder and CEO here at Telgorithm. Just a high level on Telgorithm. Telgorithm is a cloud SMS or text messaging, business text messaging API provider. Although we offer other solutions in regards to text messaging and voice, we specialize specifically in A2P 10DLC, and that is what we're all about. And the main reason we founded Telgorithm is to provide transparency in both service, knowledge, and technology to the broader industry that we believe is much needed. And in addition to that, when speaking of service, I have Kris, our head of customer success, joining me today for today's webinar as well, who will help get into some of the specifics and the challenges and some of the solutions that we are consistently working towards to help make things much simpler. Kris, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. It's good to be here. Again, my name is Kris. I head up the customer success team here at Telgorithm. My team's responsible for a few different areas of service, obviously including technical support, but also just ensuring we can provide some consultancy on all things A2P 10DLC.
Thanks so much, Kris. And just to add on that with the word consultancy, many times we hone in and we provide a lot of consultancy, that so much so that many times folks actually believe that we are a tack-on layer to another vendor. And can we just use you guys as a consultancy with our current provider? We are a provider, and the status quo of the broader industry today should not have to require you to pay extra to get those consultancies which are needed. If a provider is going to offer you 10DLC messaging service, they should, included in that service, provide you with enough knowledge and ability to be able to manage that and get you going with that service. And that is a fundamental belief here at Telgorithm. And so shouldn't be upcharged for those things or consider that as a secondary thing. But when folks come in many times and reach out to us, which we love in general, sometimes we get confused with being a consultancy. We're absolutely not a consultancy. That is a part of our service. But the goal for us is to make sure that you could turn up 10DLC in a timely manner and in a clean way and get as close to product-led growth as possible. And Kris and team help make that happen from an educational consultancy standpoint. That said, moving on to the agenda here, we got quite a bit to get through today. So, and by the way, I just want to do a kind of quick check here. We've done quite a few webinars over the past 4 years in the past, and we've hosted many individuals from the industry, including the vice president, the campaign registry twice. You should go back and check on some of these videos. We have them up on YouTube and social media, where I delve into a lot of detail on some of the items we're going to touch on today. And so just go ahead and check those out, and those will be very helpful for you, but we will touch as best we can on some of those items today. We will break down the 10DLC ecosystem. It is very confusing, and it's sometimes changing, and many folks are confused by different components of that. We'll be going through that in a second. We'll also go through the latest pains. What are the latest pains that we're hearing from prospects and what we're seeing? the biggest questions in general. And then stay tuned for the end for an exclusive offer for everyone attending here today as a token of our thanks. Let's jump right into it. So what we're looking at here to start is first, I'd like to kind of look at this like if you ever been to a mall, where do I stand and how do I get to my goal? How do I get to my stores? Where am I and what are all the pieces needed to get to my place? So typically, the way we like to visualize this is via a typical legacy cloud SMS API provider. If you are currently partnered with a cloud SMS API provider, it is likely that this is your setup today. And I'm going to call a few items out here to kind of for us to get our leggings on this. And so up in the top left there, that's where you sit. And likely you are directly integrated via API to your service provider, your cloud SMS API provider. And the interesting component beyond that is that your SMS MMS API provider is directly integrated with and partnered with two types of entities. And one is this thing called a campaign registry, and one is this thing called a DCA. So the campaign registry is the entity that is partnered with all the network operators, is partnered with all the aggregators, that brings the whole checks and balance system of ATP 10DLC together. And regardless of who you're using, when you create a brand or a campaign, those concepts were actually created by the TCR acronym, known as the campaign registry. And what we want to call out over here is we typically, as an ISV, which I assume most folks attending here today are, you're an independent software vendor versus a specific brand, you typically will give your current provider, your customers, which are the brands, information for your service provider, your CNP, your connectivity partner, to then share upstream with the campaign registry. And so there's a few issues with this. One is transparency and one is ownership. You shouldn't have to provide your customers' EIN or tax IDs to your provider. That should be provided directly to the campaign registry. And one of the things many times many of these legacy vendors promote is, in providing all of this information to us, it'll actually make things much simpler for you. It's actually 100% false. And going directly to the campaign registry itself, which any ISV is mandatorily supposed to be doing, they're actually the APIs that you're going to use or the processes to get set up are exactly the same, meaning you are not eliminating any process from your end by giving a tax ID or information about your customers and brands directly to your connectivity partner for them to then go to the TCR. If anything, you're adding a bottleneck in a middleman in doing that. That's one point. The second point is you don't have ownership and transparency. So if, for instance, if they tell you this brand or campaign was created or it was rejected, how do you really know that that's actually really what happened? And in addition to that, there's also a lack of ownership. There's a concept today in this industry of being able to migrate a campaign from vendor to vendor. As you know, today, particularly as of February 3rd, there is no longer a concept of sending unregistered traffic on a local or a 10DLC number anymore. And so it is crucial and important to make sure that you have flexibility in this regard. And so if you are giving information to your provider and having them register for you, actually they become what's called the CSP, the campaign service provider, and then they also hold the CNP ownership. Your connectivity partner should just be your CNP, not your CSP. You are the CSP. And so because you don't have that visibility and because you don't have the ownership, if you ever wanted to switch vendors or you wanted a multi-thread or leave a vendor because you didn't like it, it would make that process much more difficult for you to do that. Now, many times there's a misconception or misguidance that's given, things are not transferable in general, which is, again, completely false. And therefore, you should go ahead and, give us this information. But this migration process is not true. And brands, as being a CSP, even if a campaign is migratable, the brand would not be migratable. That's just one point here, just to point out here. And I'll highlight this on the next slide as well. And then also when it comes to DCA, so these are the partners upstream that are partnered or interconnected directly with the network operators. They are the last hop before you actually send a text message, before your text message actually gets to the wireless carrier. And there is a main one main DCA within this industry that many of the cloud API providers you are likely partnering with uses as a primary provider today. And that recently has created additional complexities as well when it comes to registration of campaigns. Let's move to the next slide here so I can visualize some of this for you. So this is the setup that you should be set up on, regardless of Telgorithm. This is exclusively what Telgorithm supports. But in general, as you think about being successful in the world of A2P 10DLC, the ideal path for you is to set to you, and you can see again where you're stationed here on that map of the mall. You are partnered directly with your software provider, and you are also partnered directly with the campaign registry itself. So anyone that is an ISV in 10DLC land equals CSP. So ISV equals CSP. To become a CSP or a campaign service provider of the campaign registry, you have to go directly to the campaign registry. There's a small fee they charge if you become approved, and likely you would as an ISV. It's a short process to do that, and that allows you to get access to both their portal and their APIs to be able to manage, create, and streamline campaign creation. And as I just mentioned, the visibility there. So step number one, you want to go directly to the registry to create your campaigns and brands and all the vettings and anything you need to do. And then you tell TCR, essentially, I would like to use this CNP or this cloud messaging provider to share this campaign with. And that allows you to multi-thread, again, allows you the ownership and allows you to get that visibility. In addition, as I mentioned in the prior slide, there is a few different actual DCAs, and that is called a direct connect aggregator. Again, these are the companies that are the last hop before the network operator. There's only a handful of them. And most cloud API providers are not DCAs. Many times they say they are, meaning they use one of the companies I have listed here in the back end. And primarily of these three companies, one in particular is used by many of the most famous cloud API providers today. And the reason why this is an issue is because this past summer, that main DCA and T-Mobile specifically, their relationship broke for various different reasons. And they no longer had a path to send messages to T-Mobile. So this DCA had to partner with another DCA to continue getting your traffic over to T-Mobile, creating downstream complexity. And so many of you may be aware of this, but many times as of November 6th, you might have noticed, hey, this campaign looked like it was approved, but now it's been rejected or DCA2 rejected. And the reason is because now you're going through a double vetting. You have to go through your provider, who's then going to the DCA1, which is that provider who now has to go to DCA2 to get that T-Mobile approval, creating additional timelines and additional complexity. So much so that sometimes DCA1's vetting team, who has to manually vet your campaigns, what they may approve, DCA2 may not like, and they're not always on the same page. And until you become fully registered with DCA2, you cannot send traffic. And so this has caused mass problems, both in processing and compliance guidance, and obviously in timelines for approval. And sometimes even thinking, hey, this is approved, but then 2 weeks later, I get a DCA2 rejection. It's not approved. Is it approved? It's not approved. When can I send traffic? But I thought I could do this. I can't do that. You told me this. And it's just creating a mass amount of confusion. Telgorithm, one of the things that is very unique about Telgorithm is we multi-thread DCAs so you don't have to worry about that. And so you don't even have to multi-thread yourself. You know, many times we get prospects that come in that say, hey, I went from this cloud, just in the last 6 months, I went from this cloud provider to this cloud provider to this cloud provider, 3 different ones. First of all, they don't even realize that they all use the same DCA. So really, in switching providers, they actually did nothing. But more importantly than that, it's just they're scratching their heads on as to what's going on. With Telgorithm, because we are partnered with the top 3 DCAs in North America, that allows us to be able to direct their campaigns on a whim, one, traffic from a load balancing perspective, but also number 2, from a compliance perspective. Who has the latest on the guidance? Who's going to be the easiest to deal with your specific use case? And I can tell you, since November 6th, we primarily do not use the DCA that, tarnish the relationship directly with T-Mobile. So currently right now, we don't have this concept of DCA2. We get you approved, that's it, it's approved right then and there. And we have this flexibility, again, in both load balancing of your traffic in general, preventing any outage and issues, and being able to load balance and migrate traffic many times internally when there are issues. And then also when it comes to compliance, being at the cutting edge, because unfortunately, as of today, not all DCAs are the same when it comes to compliance. Some of them interpret guidance from T-Mobile, as an example, differently, and that is consistently changing, causing even more confusion. So we have dedicated members of the vetting team at each of these DCAs listed. And then in addition to that, we're also at the latest when it comes to compliance guidance because of this as to what's going on. And because, again, we are heavily focused on A2P 10DLC, this remains our specific focus versus many other different things. And this is what the unique thing and unique advantage of Telgorithm is in this specific area here that's worth calling out, particularly in this time and date where many are experiencing these issues that I mentioned here. That said, let's move ahead here a bit. Speaking of pains, Kris, who leads up our customer experience team, is literally at the ground floor in speaking with our customers and prospects about what the latest things that are going on. Kris, if you want to update the audience on some of the things that you're seeing at the ground level these days and talk through some of those items for a bit.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we do, see a lot of either prospects or new customers coming into Telgorithm, sharing their stories about some of the pains with 10DLC. So very familiar with that. And as we transition, customers into Telgorithm, they're usually pleasantly surprised to see how we approach a lot of this stuff. So I think the biggest change most recently was in February with non-registered traffic actually being cut by all DCAs. The last DCA to do that was Cineverse, and that was in effect on February 3rd of this year. So if what that means is if you do not have your brand or campaign registered with TCR, you're no longer able to send messages. So that's been a big transition for customers coming out of that. And I'll highlight a couple of the pains listed here as well, specifically with rejections. I think we have strong relationships with our DCAs, and so we feel like we get ahead of these pretty quickly. But a lot of times the rejections will come back in a pretty vague sense where it's one change to a campaign, and then you have to resubmit it, and then you get rejected again. So you're kind of stuck in this cycle of having to resubmit campaigns, get feedback, resubmit again, and so all of that costs obviously time and energy. So and I think the other thing too is just Aaron mentioned, just the transparency of how to design these campaigns is there's a lot of gray area sometimes that we have to interpret. But we've got it locked down pretty well in that we're clear on what the DCAs are requesting and actually looking for. So we try and be a little bit more proactive in that sense to allow our customers to provide those campaigns to us, we review them, and then we help to make those changes. And we've seen even customers that have come from other providers, even paying extra support, as Aaron mentioned. I think of pro services a lot and consultancy where it is a paid service. And so even having that paid service available still does not solve for all of these problems. So.
Yes. And by the way, not only paying for extra service that again should be status quo, you shouldn't have to pay extra to turn up a service that you're fundamentally going to that provider for. But also when it comes to rejections, as many of you may know, when you share a campaign today, there's typically a $15 vet fee. And if that campaign gets rejected and you have to fix something, besides the hassle of having to fix that or having to go to your brand to update something, after the fact, after they might have waited 2+ weeks, in some cases 2 months, just to get a feedback on all this time they're waiting to send traffic. If you have to make an adjustment and then you resubmit the campaign to DCA, well, you're going to be charged another $15 every time. It might take you 10 times. You're not getting the right guidance just to get there. With Telgorithm, the word that we like to go by is proactive. So our team, before you even sign with Telgorithm, you share your campaigns agnostically because we only partner with CSPs, as I alluded to earlier. Agnostically, you're able to share campaigns with us before you sign anything with Telgorithm. We then look at your campaigns. We give you the guidance, so it allows you to streamline and update your customers on that, update your campaigns, create templates out of it to TCR via the RESTful APIs. so that the likelihood that you're going to get a rejection is much less. And therefore you're getting a quicker turn up, you're getting a better overall process in regards to getting that campaign approved the first time. Now, can a rejection still happen? Sure, if there's a nuance or somebody changes something, but our first time approvals percentage is 95% plus. 95% of the time, because of our proactive and detailed guidance that we give, we have a 95% approval on the first time. So that's not talking about processing timelines. That is talking about no matter when your campaign is processed, that concept of it ultimately leading to a rejection that you have to fix. And that's a big deal as well in regards to, partnering with a company like Telgorithm or with any vendor that's giving you that guidance. You don't want to have to, throw things up against the wall to figure out what's going to work, all at your expense or your brand's and your customer's expense. That's not the proper way to do things. Just sign up here, we'll figure it out later. No, let's strategize together and let's collaborate on understand your use cases, your customers, your challenges up front to ensure we're going to get you approved and make sure that that's going to happen in a seamless manner. Thanks for calling that out, Kris. Moving on over here. So because of all the frustrations here, if you want to adjust to the next slide here, because of all the frustrations, and it makes total sense, many times we get folks coming in and saying, you know what, I give up on all this 10DLC stuff. I'm just gonna, I'll just switch to toll-free. Hopefully that'll be a lot easier. And this is just a wrong way of looking at things to solve the problem. As they always say, the grass is greener on the other side, so be careful what you wish for. First, just a few points in that regard. With toll-free is likely in the very near, I don't have an exact date, but it's going to be coming in the near future to join the 10DLC ecosystem. So without getting into all the background and detail behind it, there's been essentially one company that had kind of a monopoly on toll-free up until about a little over a year ago. That monopoly has since been broken, and all the direct DCEs are now building those toll-free paths and working with TCR and the network operators in conjunction with that. So in the very near future, toll-free will be entering the 10DLC or the TCR ecosystem as well. So if you don't want to put all your eggs in that basket, by the time you're done integrating and switching everyone over and selling all of that to your brands, all of a sudden now they have to do this here is not going to work either. And so that's something that, the folks joining today should have that in mind as well. Additionally, not a toll-free is not ideal for everyone. The way, when you're deciding between a short code, a toll-free number, or a local phone number, really the ideal question shouldn't be, which is the best turn-up process that you should work to regardless. It should be, which is the best based on my customer's use case that I should use. Do they have a toll-free number for the last 30 years and that's what all their customers know, or there's some specific national reason that they want a toll-free number? But if the real use case is that they need the locality, the customers want to see that locality, the answer is not just switching to toll-free. And just to even add, toll-free from a messaging perspective is more expensive industry-wide than there's cost for inbound messages. The messages in general are more cost on that side. And in addition to that, there's still a turn-up process. You can't just purchase a toll-free number today. It has to go through a verification process through that company I just mentioned today. And that can take time as well to turn it up. So it's more expensive. You still have to go through a compliance process. It may not be the ideal use case, and it is likely to enter the TCR ecosystem in the near future anyway. So that is an unfortunate misconception, and it's understandable why people look at that, but that is strongly not a recommended option ultimately, unless your brand actually needs a toll-free number, which, by the way, we do support toll-free as well. Moving on to the next. If you want to review this one, Kris.
Yeah. I think it's pretty often that I think some of our customers have the misconception that campaigns are vetted by TCR, which is simply not true. They're actually vetted by DCAs. And I think this is why we have such close relationship. I mean, this is one of the reasons why we have such close relationships with our DCA. I know that my team are meeting at least once a week with these teams and have direct channels for support with our DCAs as well. So it's important for us to maintain those relationships.
100%. And by the way, just to add an additional point to be 100% clear, a brand creation is done by the campaign registry via a vetting partner that they have for you to validate and verify a brand. But a campaign itself Well, there's different statuses that are under, and you could check some of our prior webinars on this subject. We go into this in heavy detail. There's various different statuses you could see. The main status you're looking for is DCA elected yes by all the network operators. And that status can only be given by a DCA. That cannot be given by the campaign registry. The campaign registry does not approve campaigns. It is a very large misconception that is unfortunate that many folks have. A DCA upstream, and again, a DCA is defined as direct connect aggregator. These are the companies that are partnered and are the last line before the network operators. These are the companies that will give the final stamp of approval on your campaign. No one else has the authority to do that, including DCR. So again, brands can be verified and are verified by the TCR itself through a vetting partner, but the campaigns that sit under those brands, which represent the use cases and which your phone numbers actually get tied to become registered, must be approved by a DCA. They are not approved by TCR. Thanks for that one, Kris.
Yeah.
Moving on here. I already touched on this before in that diagram of the mall, if you will, on this DCA2. So again, of the main, we'll say the most famous cloud messaging providers today, they are all partnered with a single DCA. So they don't multi-thread DCAs, and they're beholden to that DCA. Of that one major DCA that I mentioned earlier tarnished a relationship with T-Mobile over this past summer, now has to go through another, in some ways, competitive DCA just to get T-Mobile traffic across. And so that has now created this additional complication on both timing and compliance guidance and all of these things in regards to turnup. And so that's essentially what secondary vetting is. Many people get confused what that is. And the reality is, for many of you, if you're partnered with a regular API company, I'll mention the most famous one here, and we'll have them highlighted in a slide later on. But just to mention one by name, the most famous is Twilio, right? So Twilio is not a DCA. So to be clear, they do not have a direct interconnect with network operators. They partner with a specific single DCA, and that is where they send your traffic to, who ultimately gets it to the network operators. But again, that DCA that they are using tarnished the relationship with T-Mobile. So now they have to use a third DCA. So really, it's actually DCA 3 vetting. DCA 1 in this case would be Twilio. DCA 2 would be that main vendor they're using. And now DCA 3 is that final hop to get your traffic to T-Mobile here. So really, this is head spinning. You have to go through all of these layers just to get a campaign approved. And, if not all of these, entities in the path are on the same page, you're going to run into massive issues. And as we mentioned earlier that, you can no longer send unregistered traffic until you become registered. So you could be held up by weeks and months and be going through tremendous amounts of headache if you are partnering with any vendor, which unfortunately today, that's many of the most famous vendors in this industry that are using this one DCA, and you're going to be running into a lot of issues. And again, just to highlight here, Telgorithm is partnering with all the major DCAs, and currently since November, we primarily send our campaigns to those other DCAs, so we don't deal with any of this DCA2 stuff, and you will see that difference on our end. One other point, I'll actually point out as well. I mentioned the word proactivity before. We are very proactive about things. Before we partner with anybody, we want to ensure that we're going to be able to get your traffic approved, because Telgorithm, as we already alluded to earlier, we don't charge separately for professional or expert services, which I would argue are way better than what our competitors offer. The only way we actually stay in business and make money is when you send text messages. Well, if we can't get you approved and are not confident of that, you simply can't send text messages. We literally have no reason to be partnered up with you. So it is in our best interest, along with yours, same level, to ensure we will be able to get you approved in a streamlined manner and a cost and effective way, or there really is no reason for us to be there, be partnering with you here. We're not selling hundreds of different things here. This is the specific thing that we are experts in. So I just wanted to call that out and point that out over here, and what you are seeing, why it's happening, what's going on, and how we're dealing with that in a different way. If you want to take this next one, Kris. Your audio might be out, Kris, on this one.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries, all good.
Um,
Focus.
yeah, so I think the biggest question here, or for this one in particular, is that should I work with directly with the DCA? I think it's to the advantage of our customers that we're sort of sit in the middle between DCAs and our customers, because we can, I think we're reducing a lot of the complications and sort of like I mentioned, the gray areas that help campaigns get approved. So as we, learn about this new information, any changes that are coming up from our upstream partners, we can relay that to you. Really, our focus is for you to focus on your business, and so taking a lot of that effort and time out of the process of working directly with DCAs would actually be an advantage to any business. And so we take on a lot of that work. We do all the heavy lifting. We negotiate on your behalf sometimes. So a lot of that is removed when we're working directly with our DCAs. So allow us to do that work for you to save you some time.
100%. And just to add a hammer home a few additional points here, many of these, so there's one of the things that we like to kind of convey to the industry is that I know there's a lot of acronyms we discussed today, CNPs, CSPs, ISVs, all this kind of stuff. It's very confusing. But the reality is this ecosystem is set up in a very specific way for a reason. So I'll kind of paint a high level picture here. It's the DCA is the closest to the network operator. That's a direct connect aggregator. Below that is what's called the CNP. This is your cloud API provider, like Telgorithm, like a Twilio. And then below that is you guys, the CSP. Below that is the brand here. And there's a very specific reason and a very specific purpose for each entity. And because, unfortunately, because the broader industry hasn't quite figured all of this out, what's tending to happen is the CSPs are trying to go up a level and everyone's trying to go up to different levels. And it's understandably so, to try to see if they could eliminate a bottleneck somewhere. But the reality is that a DCA is not set up to specifically and directly serve a CSP, surely not a brand. And so there is technical limitation, complexities to that. I don't want to get into all the complex details of it right now, getting NNIDs. It is not an apples to apples to go from, let's just say, a Twilio to a Cineverse here. There's much more involved and much more needed to do that. Additionally, as you go higher up the chain, you're a needle in the haystack, right? It's Twilio is ex DCA customer as this massive company, and then there's you sitting here, and you think you have bad service today. It's going to be 10 or 100x that right now. So going up a level many times might seem enticing. It's going to require a lot of technical work, which is not apples to apples. And then what if things don't work out? Then where you're going next to the next DCA, and then this one here, it gets all very confusing and a lot of tech debt very fast. And ultimately, it doesn't solve the problem. Really, the reality is, and we're strong believers in, if everyone played their part in a role, the DCA plays its proper part, and the CNP plays its proper part, and enables the CSP to enable the brand, this should work in the proper way rather than going up the chain or down the chain, and I'm not sure, confused to go where here, and it just creates a lot more confusion. And it's hardly ever we find that somebody that is a CSP or an entity as a CSP or a brand that's going up to a DCA solves their problems. They usually end up with a whole new set of problems, in addition, usually, to the current problems they had that they were not even aware of, and now they're stuck and they have all this going on. So definitely something to understand and think about. And we're trying to eliminate that because we are partnered with multiple DCAs. We're trying to eliminate that friction, give you that guidance in both our service and our technology, so you don't have to worry about that in trying to figure out where you are and where do I need to get to make this all work and happen. Thanks for that, Kris.
Yep.
Moving on here. So what are some of the biggest things we can do to avoid the biggest rejection things to talk about it? Kris, if you want to take on this one.
Yeah. This is I mean, we do this all day, every day. So I think I think the top three are listed there. And quickly, I think all of this sort of surrounds the concept of specificity around what's actually needed within the campaigns. I've personally dealt with other brands before that offer text messaging, and a lot of times we would get, vague responses, vague answers, not specifics. And a lot of this has to do with very specific language that has to go into your intake forms, your privacy policies, on the website. not even having to do with your campaign. So the actual campaign that you submit to TCR. So we, I think that the difference here again is having specific feedback. And again, the trick is to be more proactive, right? As Aaron mentioned, we as customers come into the Telgorithm ecosystem, we take a look at their campaigns to ensure that we can build a repeatable process that allows them to get their campaigns approved on the first time round. So we'll help customers in all of these details. We'll take a look at websites. We'll sort of act as a DCA to pre-vet their campaigns and take a look at all of those details before they even submit. So yeah, again, proactive advice is key here. Just kind of navigating the intricacies of 10DLC.
Is there any specifics? I know we have 3 bullets highlighted here that's worth calling out here about recent changes or things that maybe our audience may not be aware of that should be aware of here. I know there's so many complexities here, but is there anything in particular that stands out to you of recent that's worth to mention today?
Yeah, I think the privacy policy is probably one of the biggest ones that we see a lot of times. And specifically, it's calling out how data is actually being shared using your customers or end users' phone numbers. So it's great to have a privacy policy, but DCAs are looking for very specific language on the fact that you won't be sharing the phone numbers unless it's for internal use. So that would be one thing that I'd say is pretty common when we look at these campaigns.
Yeah, I'll just add a few for myself, just for my own. I see we have, vague call to actions.
Mhm.
So of recent, this is talking about the call to action section that under the campaign area when you create a campaign. In the past, DCAs weren't as particular about this. Now they are, and this is all the DCAs. Call to actions cannot be vague, meaning just say some vague thing. First of all, they have to call out specifically, this is the area where you tell the network operators specifically how you're gathering direct and explicit opt-in. Just to add a point here, and that direct opt-in cannot just be verbal anymore, unfortunately. The reason is that has been exploited a bit where people just say we get it verbally and there's no way to provide a proof of that. So you cannot just have verbal opt-in. There needs to be another method as well. You need to outline specifically how this brand, this campaign for this use case specifically is getting direct opt-in from the end user that will be messaged from phone numbers associated with this campaign. And additionally, you must list out all the places that you obtain opt-in. So for example, let's just say you get it on some, somebody walks into a store and they write it down on a form and you would have to share a screenshot and teacher of that form, but it's also gathered on a website and it's gathered over the phone. You have to specifically call out these areas. I will tell you that when DCA reviews campaigns, they will always go under the brand's website. They will click on all the links on the website, every contact form, every area on that website. And if they find any area that opt-in is collected and it is not listed in that CTA description, you will get a rejection. Now, many times with your current provider, it's a very vague description of what it really is. You don't really even know that's what it is. And sometimes, unfortunately, your partner doesn't even know what that is. In our case, we will guide you on that. But there's one thing I did want to call out here, that is very specific and something that a DCA of late does look out for. So it has to be detailed and you have to call out every single place that it is, and it must be direct. There's no third party opt-in, even in places where there are maybe certain industries or legal exceptions. Aside from legal exceptions, there's still the code of conduct for each individual network operator, and they have not expanded to incorporate those legal exceptions. Even though there might be some legal thing, it's not about legal. Unfortunately, it's about what is the kind of the rules that the network operators have decided today, unfortunately, that need to be in place to get things going here. So that's one thing that I have noticed recently that I'll call out to the audience here.
Yeah, that's true.
Good stuff, Kris. Moving on. Again, are all messaging API providers the same? So I alluded to some earlier, and the answer is really one word: focus. There are many great cloud API providers today that operate within the cloud communication industry, and many of them are very phenomenal. But Where Telgorithm specifically differs is we are the experts in this thing called A to P 10DLC. For 4+ years now, and have fostered relationships, have billions of messages traversing our platform, and I'll speak to that in a second. Some major brands and logos are using us for quite a bit of time right now. And so these many other providers are great and they're phenomenal, but where we specifically specialize is in A to P 10DLC. And for some of the things that I mentioned today, some of those differentiators make a very, very big difference. And if your provider is not doing those things, which they likely are not, you're going to have a headache. And if you try to do them yourself on top of that, that headache could be expanded even further. And so really, that's really what makes us different than many of these others. Again, we are heavily focused and masters and experts at 10DLC. And in addition to that, it's not just, myself that's been in this industry for a very long time that's mastered that. Our entire team is masters at that as well. And we're very diligent about that, making sure that everyone you're going to speak with at Telgorithm is a master themselves. Not that you should, reach out to somebody who has to reach out to some other person, who has to reach out to some other person, and keeps going and going until maybe you find somebody that may have an answer. Everyone on our team and on Kris's team are experts and consistently syncing up with TCR and DCAs and everyone involved in this ecosystem to make sure we maintain being those experts. And that is what you're going to get as a difference from Telgorithm without even have to paying extra for that as well. Kris, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add on this one from your perspective.
Yeah, I think you summarized it well. I think the big difference between from what I'm hearing from customers and prospects is that with the larger competitors, they're highly specialized in certain areas. Anyone that comes into Telgorithm is skilled up on all things, even on the technical API side to all things compliance, 10DLC. We understand the ecosystem very well. And when you call into us or you send us an email for support, you're going to have that one person help you to solve that solution all the way through. We don't escalate to another team. We don't need to. We simply handle all of requests within our team.
That's right. And one last point I'll also mention here, I touched on this earlier, but I do want to highlight it here as well, is many of these logos you're looking at here on the back, first of all, none of these are DCAs. And in addition to that, not being a DCA, many of them use the same DCA. And so therefore, you can be going from vendor to vendor here. And if your ultimate root problem is actually with the DCA that they're using and beholden to, you're going to have a really serious issue because they're all using the same DCA. It's one thing you switch to another vendor because they have a different setup to solve your problem. Many don't realize this and just rip their hair out going from vendor to vendor to vendor, not realizing that the root problem is actually with the DCA the vendors are using versus the vendor itself. Now, I'm not saying those vendors don't have issues themselves, but the core issues here that we're discussing today, usually that is the root reason for that. And that's a big differentiator of Telgorithm as well, because we are diversifying our stack in that manner for you. Moving on here. Another big misconception many times that people have, and this is very founded, is people get nervous about switching providers in general. There's a lot that goes into that, and it is nerve-wracking. I don't know who the new provider is in general. It's going to be this huge, massive project that's going to take 2 years to do this. And while it is a project, there are many misconceptions that people have in switching providers. First of all, starting from the beginning, just at a high level here, most cloud API providers have a similar looking outlet, and you have the plug, meaning what the magic that happens behind the outlet could be different or better or worse. But the outlet itself is the same voltage, and you already have the plug. So you don't have to rebuild the whole plug over again. All of our outlets are the same. So you just take your plug here and just plug this one in here, and you're done. And Telgorithm's APIs are built in this fashion. Not only that, we even have an open API generator as well. So if somehow you're using some sort of code base that we don't support by default, you can actually very quickly generate a library in whatever code base you're using and then instantly move your plug over to us. So that's point number one. Point number two, there is a big misconception about this concept of campaign migration. So the campaign registry early last year for CSPs launched this migration tool. That you can migrate campaigns. And even if you're recreating campaigns as well, there's a big misconception that migration is going to be this massive project. I'm going to have my entire team on deck manually creating campaigns in the campaign registries portal, And that is simply not true, and that would not be very smart of anyone to do that. The reality is there are APIs that the campaign registry has, RESTful APIs, that are both enabled for both migration and or recreation of campaigns if needed. So you just basically align with your vendor on that payload. In Telgorithm's case, we tell you what that payload should look like, what you need to put in there, and then you just you create the logic, and then you run it for tens of thousands of campaigns at a shot. There's no concept of, you shouldn't have to worry about, my entire team is going to have to be there manually creating campaigns in some sort of a portal. That is not the case, and it is a very big misconception. Another misconception that people have is, I'd rather migrate a campaign if I can versus recreate it. And the reason is because if I migrate the campaign that was already DCA approved, it'll likely be approved or will retain its approval with the new vendor you're migrating to, versus if I recreate the new campaign, I'll either save money on vetting fees or I'm going to have to go through a brand new vetting as well. This is also incorrect. You have any campaign, whether it's being migrated or recreated, has to meet the latest campaign guidelines. And let me add to this. Unfortunately, a few years back, things were the guidance and compliance requirements that exist today, many of them did not exist 2 or 3 years ago. As an example, a website. Today, it is mandatory to put a website under the brand. But 3 years ago, it was optional to do that. So you might have registered some brand 3 years ago that was compliant back then, but today they wouldn't. So some folks are hesitant to move because they're like, oh, if I have to do this now, I'm going to have to make them put in, a website. Well, I hate to break anyone's bubble here today, but there is going to be this year, by all DCAs, as required by the network operator, a requirement to go back in time and check to make sure that previous campaigns, surely that are 12 months or older, will have to go through that revetting process all over again, or risk suspension. So it's better to handle that now in migrating, get yourself in the right way, and surely for campaigns going forward here. So I just wanted to clarify, migration can help. Essentially, in a payload, we don't have to recreate the template and using the same campaign ID. But with regards to some of the other concepts that I mentioned, migration doesn't really help in those areas, and it's a big misconception of things. Additionally, when it comes to the other one, is people are scared of disruption. Well, we have an automated number porting API that is connected at the carrier level that allows you to automate LOAs. You don't have to fill out manual LOAs every time. You can have similar data on the LOA, submit that via an API we have. And we also have real-time status webhooks that inform you the exact moment on the carrier side that a number becomes fully active and registered on Telgorithm side. And so you would pre-program all of this in, and therefore you could migrate over without having to wait on a disruption in order to know that a number was ported with the new provider. And so see, these are some of the, again, big misconceptions that we hear many times in speaking with prospects. Big, massive project, big overhaul, all these things are going to need to be redone. And more times than not, now sometimes people do have some unique edge case and there's something there, but 9 times out of 10, that is not the case. And actually, I'll even add that integrating, we hardly ever see it take, and this is maximum time to actually integrate against Telgorithm is 2 weeks, maximum time. And again, generating new campaigns, we've had many customers come over that generated tens of thousands of campaigns within just a very short period of time, and that comes over to Telgorithm in a flawless and seamless way. So it is not always accurate to assume that switching vendors is going to be this massive project. And we allow for you to integrate in small ways first. Obviously, you want to mitigate risk. So it's not more from a complexity standpoint as far as team or integration, more from a trust standpoint. And we allow you to test us and navigate over in a way that you're comfortable with from a comfortability standpoint. But from a complexity standpoint, I think there's a lot of misconception about that as well. Moving on here. So just to highlight here, we've touched on a lot of these today and the differences about Telgorithm. And so with us, it's about not only getting set up and making sure we're about streamlining, making sure you're going to have the long-term success on Telgorithm, not just about just get you locked in right now and sign right now and just move forward here. We want to make sure that we're going to be able to support you both in the short and especially in the longer term, and you'll be able to streamline. And so we're providing free expert guidance. If I'm not mistaken, of late, and it's unfortunate, I think every one of what you can consider Telgorithm competitors charges heavy money today just to get support. This should not be the case. Again, you're buying a service just to get going. You shouldn't have to pay additional for support just to get going. So that is included in our service. And what I will point out is many folks many times use the word premium. We have experts. Our entire team are experts at this stuff, and you're going to get that expert guidance included in our service. Campaign approvals, because of our relationships with DCA, with multiple DCAs, because we have dedicated teams assigned specifically to Telgorithm at multiple DCAs, because of all of these things, and because of our proactivity, we have built what's called a KYC, or Know Your Customer relationship, with these upstream DCAs. And we've done this from day one, going on 4+ years now. And so we built that trust that they know 9 times out of 10, our traffic is clean, our brands are clean, because they know our process. You have to be a CSP. We look at your campaigns, we guide you. And because of all of that, processing times are much faster. So it's not some magic trick. Many times we ask, well, how can this big company, it's going to take 2 weeks, but somehow Telgorithm magic, it's not a magic trick. It's that we've done things in a very unique and specific way from the start and continue to do that. That's allowed us to do that. Anyone could do that. It's a matter of choosing where you want to focus your attention on doing that. And that's what allows us to do this. I could tell you now, many times campaigns can actually be approved in literally a few hours or less. But our average approval times now are actually in the 24-hour range right now. And this is something you can actually test agnostically, because you are a CSP. You have to be a CSP to integrate with Telgorithm. And so we have no place to hide. You will see in your agnostic campaign registry account how fast it takes us to accept your campaign and how fast it becomes DCA elected. We have nowhere to hide. And we give you this ability to test this out before we even partner with you. Before you sign anything, throughout our process of partnering, before we partner and sign anything, or you sign anything, you are able to validate that. We improve deliverability because we are managing and making sure the use cases across the board are clean. And we're very meticulous in doing that and making sure that someone is indeed who they say they are, and that their platform has good embedding processes because of this. So because of that, we have very clean traffic in general that improves overall deliverability throughout our customer base. So meaning the filtering sometimes that could take place upstream is much less on our side because that trust has been built. I already touched on the automated porting, easy to use APIs. And all in all, we still believe we're very competitive in the industry when it comes to pricing. And one thing I'll just mention on pricing is we want to solve problems, right? What good is it to pay nothing or near nothing and negotiate that for a message that'll ultimately get you nowhere, or that you're going to have to spend tens of thousands of dollars on, premium, some sort of premium service for? It ultimately doesn't matter. You have to look at both sides. The unit economics, of course, have to make sense, but I don't want to pay, as they say, for some car where there's no engine in there. I'm not going to get far, right? What good is it to buy the car for cheap if there's no engine in there? So it's the whole picture here. We believe we are competitively priced in general because we do believe in that top line, but this other part of the picture as well is important to be aware of as well as you vet different vendors. I didn't even get into our unique technologies we have in smart queuing. You should check that out, and we're happy to discuss that further with anyone attending here today and beyond. That said, let's move on to the next slide here. One other thing, as I mentioned, we're now 4+ years in this industry, and we are partnered with a very diverse set of customers. I'll just point out an additional point that some may be skeptical about, but it's actually true. There has never been a customer that has scaled and ramped onto Telgorithm that has canceled. I repeat, that is very rare to see that. And not only that, all of our customers have consistently continued to expand traffic. We are diversified through multitude of industries. Our technology in and of itself saves hundreds of thousands of dollars monthly. We are also partnered with some premium vendors like Constant Contact as a customer for 2 years now. We're actually about to launch a very great testimonial with their chief product officer on their experiences with us. And so many of these large companies have been partnering with us multiple years now and are experiencing amazing service, continue to expand traffic. And so we're very diverse in this area, both large brands and diverse with regards to very industries that we are able to support.
Great. Thanks everyone for sticking around. We're going to get to a few questions, but first just wanted to share a special offer for our guests of the webinar today. So if you book a call with Telgorithm today, we'll review 5 campaigns for free and give you that guidance and support that you might need for those campaigns. So it's a really good way to experience Telgorithm's level of 10DLC support. So just after the webinar, head over to our website and contact us. Just put how you heard about us webinar, and we'll be able to get that offer set up for you. But jumping to some questions, we've been receiving a lot in the chat, so thank you for
Awesome.
that. I wanted to first start out with some specific questions on like campaign setup and things like that. So one of our attendees has food trucks as their business, their businesses that they support, and they don't have websites. So how should they navigate the privacy policy situation with that DCA is looking for businesses such as that?
Good question. So first of all, those are two different things. First of all, you need a website, regardless of a privacy. Even if a privacy policy wasn't required, which it is, in general, you need to have a website. So but a website, if you're a small business, can be even a Facebook page, as long as there's some sort of presence there. Privacy policy is still required. There's only one exception to the rule for having a website or privacy policy, and that is for an entity called a sole proprietor, which we do support, by the way. But that is very unique in the sense that you have to truly be a sole proprietor. That means you never registered with a government entity as a business, number one, and they will check that. Also, you are a one-person business, not any other. You have to be a one-person business to qualify as that. Without those two requirements, you would have to string up some sort of a website and have a privacy policy on that website. Now, we could help you with providing you guidance with what languages are needed in there. It's not very complicated, but you would need to have some sort of page. Again, it could be a Facebook page if you're a small business, and you would have to have a privacy policy on that page as well, which we could guide you through. The only exception, again, is not with Telgorithm, this is industry-wide, is a sole proprietor, which I just described exactly the specific requirements for that. Other than that, you would need a website, but great question.
Yeah, and then on that same vein of campaign setup and what DCAs are looking for, if someone has multiple CTAs on their website, whether in person or on the site, is it smarter to just document the opt-in all on the site to make sure DCA can find it?
It's
How
smart
should they
to,
go about?
good question. So I just want to clarify, because I did touch on this earlier. When you create a campaign in the campaign registry, whatever vendor you're using, when you create a campaign, there's a section called CTA, call to action. In this, the requirement, the purpose of this specific section is to tell that person at DCA specifically all of the places possible that direct explicit opt-in is gathered. That is the reason for that. So it's not about so that they don't have to go to the website and find all of the places. Meaning, as I mentioned before, if they go to the website and somehow find a place that you didn't mention, that could potentially cause a rejection. So the key here is in this specific call to action section, when you are creating a campaign, that section is specifically meant to tell the person at DCA specifically all of the places that opt-in is gathered, right? And that could be verbal, it could be through a form, it could be through somebody walks into an automotive dealership and they sign some form and whatever it is, and it's opt-in, you would take a screenshot of that, and in the registry today, you have the ability to upload screenshots of opt-ins as well. So the recommendation is, and it's a requirement, you have to put all of the places and be as specific as you can about where the explicit opt-ins are being gathered. And as I mentioned before, it cannot just be verbal opt-in. You need to have some other method in addition to verbal. I mean, verbal is accepted, but not in and of itself. There has to be some other place that they could validate that visually that an opt-in was gathered. Good question.
Awesome. Great. Well, we are at time. We appreciate everybody's time and attention. And if you have any other questions, definitely feel free to reach out at telgorithm.com or reach out to our team directly at team@telgorithm.com, and we'll be happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Yes, and just to add, thanks so much everyone for your time today. It's really, really appreciated. And either way, we always like to talk to people, chat with people from the industry. Please reach out to us. Our team is here waiting, and we geek out about this stuff, as you could tell. And so please reach out with any questions you have, and we'll be happy to answer them, and looking forward to hearing from everyone. And thanks again for your time, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Easy now.